the morning is go get a cup of coffee. Maybe you'll learn something.
We both took the same oath, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I don't recall there being an expiration date on that. I'm going to keep my big BA, keep my friends the same, keep the government out of my business, and y'all can keep the change.
He is the free American, Clay Douglas.
We know what we need. We know who to blame.
Catch the Free American Hour, weekdays at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern.
I'll keep the USA and y'all can keep the change.
For the podcast and more details, visit www.freeamerican.com or catch the podcast by phone by calling 832-999-8621.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host, Clay Douglas. And my guest today is Chris Bennett. Hello, Chris. How are you?
It's a pleasure. Cold morning up here in Canada, but it's a good day.
Okay, listen, I apologize all those nasty things I said about the trolls from Canada, so I apologize in advance for that. So how are you, Chris? I get a feeling that you've been in this battle for some time, and I've tried to tell my audience, that while I was serving time in a Texas prison, back when having a joint could have been a life sentence, I wrote some books about the world in which marijuana was legal, that hemp was legal, that there were no laws against victimless crimes. And 40 years ago, that was science fiction. Today, it seems like people are starting to wake up, that sometime, thanks to the media, who we don't trust much anyway down here in America, the media was responsible. William Randolph Hearst got that castle on the mountain by putting hemp out of business. And we allowed the communists to steal our number one cash crop and make it illegal for any Americans to even grow it. And as Ron Paul says, and we've got two presidential candidates that are talking about hemp and the war on drugs right now. We got two people that are saying we shouldn't have this, or we shouldn't have this. So maybe we're making some progress, and you can walk down the street and smoke a joint if you sucked up to the medical profession right now, and I'm not sure that's exactly a good thing. What's your opinions on it? How did you get involved in the cannabis research? You got some books out.
Mm-hmm.
And
I've written 3 books, Green Gold, The Tree of Life, Marijuana and Magic and Religion, which came out in 1995, Sex, Drug, Violence in the Bible, which came out in 2001, and more recently, Cannabis and the Soma Solution. I actually had a religious experience using cannabis like 22 years ago, and I started researching that, and then around that same time, I found out about Jack Herer's The Emperor Wears No Clothes, Hemp and the Marijuana Conspiracy, and like a lot of other activists out there, that was kind of the lightning rod that really drew me in.
Well, let me just stop you for just a second, because that really makes me feel good, because I put Jack Herer into a head shop there in Van Nuys while he was, and my friends and I helped him edit the Emperor Wears No Clothes. My friend Clark Jones was there working with me on one of my magazines, and I backed Jack while he wrote Emperor Wears No Clothes, and I sold it for many years through the Free American.
Nice. Yeah, well, important work, It probably turned on more marijuana activists than any other book out there, or maybe even any other thing, I don't know. But, that's been 22 years here in Canada. We've seen some progress since then. We've got legal industrial hemp, and we've got federally legal medical marijuana. And we almost got, marijuana at least decriminalized, close to legalized 2003, 2004. But unfortunately, here in Canada, things have gone backwards now. We have a Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, who really has a hate on for anything to do with marijuana. And we've just passed this new bill, C-10, which brings in all sorts of mandatory minimum sentences regarding cannabis offenses. If you grow more than 5 plants, you get a mandatory minimum sentence of 6 months. If you make marijuana brownies, you get mandatory minimum sentences. Making hashish can get you a mandatory minimum sentence. And all this has just kicked in the last week or so. So I'm sure we're going to see a huge increase in our prison population here. Harper's investing billions in new prisons to help deal with these new laws that he's passed, and we've been seeing the American prison lobby, private prison lobby up here in Canada, and that's probably contributed a lot to these marijuana laws and this increase in incarceration.
Let me ask you something, Chris. Why don't people understand? Now, I get this. I get a lot of people saying, "Well, you know, we just can't help Clay. We can't buy his books. He's so pro pot. He's pro pot." What part of why don't these people understand? If a man with a badge can walk up to you and say, "What's that in your pocket, son?" You're in a police state. If he can take you to jail for something you got in your pocket, there's no corpus delicti, there's no crime here, and yet in America, we've got millions of people in prison here over some type of drug charge, mostly. Why don't people realize this? How come? Why isn't the Patriot movement standing behind the cannabis movement?
Well, I think it's kind of a threat to the system as it is in a lot of ways. When Ronald Reagan was a senator before he became president, he was just kind of starting on his anti-marijuana campaign. He was talking about the kids in the 60s. He says, these young people, they get together, they read books, they smoke marijuana, and they talk. Like these 3 things were a recipe for disaster, And his son, Ron Reagan Jr., when questioned on his mom and dad's Just Say No campaign and their focus on marijuana, he says, it's not marijuana, the mildly mind-altering substance. It's marijuana, the antithesis of the state. And I think that's it in a nutshell, that, it is in a sense a threat to, Republican type of values, because it makes people question those type of things. A guy smokes a joint and he goes into the church and he hears the preacher talking to the pulpit and he's like, yeah, right. He turns on the news and he listens to the news and he goes, yeah, right. And he starts questioning what's going on in his country and with the people around him, and he's seeing things from a different perspective. And in many ways, that's a threat to the industrial military complex. The guy wakes up in the morning and he's like, do I want to go to my job in that crappy mill today? Or do I want to stay home and play the bass guitar for a while? And a lot of guys make the choice to stay home and play the bass guitar because cannabis makes you reevaluate things, and you realize that what is really valuable is things like free time and feeling good about yourself and these types of things, not material wealth, not jobs, not these types of things. And so people begin to, if it's a job you love, like there's lots of good jobs out there, but people begin to reevaluate things and take a look at things with a new perception. And this is really a threat to the, established status quo.
And cannabis is very good for the American economy. It's very good. I mean, this whole country was created on cannabis paper, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, for sure. Everybody knows, the whole thing about industrial hemp and, the American Constitution being written on it, the American flag being written by. But now what's happened is this prohibition has become so entrenched that, like say, for example, when Prop 19 was happening in California, the biggest opposition to it came from things like the policemen's union, the prison guards union, the prison guards industry, the prison industry, all these types of things, because those people count on people getting arrested in these large numbers in order to keep their own industries going. Particularly the private prison industry. They're just like shameless lobbyists for any sort of legal changes or anything like that would see a drop in the prison population.
The prison population is the point. I mean, I've tried to tell people what's happening in America right now. Every plank on the Communist Manifesto has been put intact in America today. And when the communists took over in Russia, they murdered 60 million white Christian Russians. Now, why do people think that can't happen here? And isn't it happen here? I mean, we've got more people in prison in this country than any communist country, including China, who has more people, 2 or 3 more times people. It's isn't that, aren't they using the hemp and the drugs to create a prison population?
Well, I would say that's definitely it. I don't know what the number of exact people in prison for marijuana possession in the U.S., but I know it's one of the highest arrest rates for any sort of crime. And, the U.S., with 5% of the world's population, has 25% of the world's prisoners. Even here, right next door in Canada, they're imprisoning the population there in the United States at a ratio of 8 to 1 per capita. We're probably going to change, seeing that number gap drop due to these new laws they passed in Canada. But yeah, it's like the way, like even if you get busted on federal charges in the U.S., you can't vote again. You know what I mean? It's a way of silencing what's often seen as a troublesome portion of the public. They go to these anti-war protests and they smell the marijuana, and they go to these environmental protests and they smell the marijuana, and they begin to associate that type of peacenik and environmental mentality with marijuana, and it's probably to some extent true, those associations, but nothing that should be criminal for sure.
The book I wrote 40 years ago was about 46 states changing the laws. The laws are changing gradually, but I think medical marijuana is a step in the right direction. But I resent having to go to a doctor to get something God gave me that I can plant in the backyard.
Well, it's crazy. There's a law against any plant. A law against the plant is completely unnatural. It's like our right to air and water, and when we're talking about man's relationship with cannabis, we're talking about a relationship that's tens of thousands of years old, thought by many people to be our oldest cultivated crop. And this is an unnatural prohibition. I don't see how any sort of Christian or Jewish or Islamic person could be for a prohibition, considering, that the Bible puts it pretty straight out in Genesis 1, I give you every herb bearing seed. And anybody that arrests another person for using cannabis or any other plant is violating God's first major covenant with man. Right there. They decided to take it on themselves to override God's own wishes, and they're punishing people. So they're going against God if they believe in God.
Well, if they believe in God, if they believe in the Bible, well, what was Jesus' anointing oil? What made him the Messiah?
This all goes back to the Hebrew can of Boston references, and there's growing wealth of evidence that Jesus, Moses, Solomon, and other biblical figures were using cannabis-based anointing oils and incenses, and even cannabis-infused wines in some cases. So, there's a wealth of evidence for this, even some archaeological evidence. I think, I really personally think that cannabis is the paradigm shift. That if we can legalize this one thing and make this one big change, that's just so much else that's wrong in the world is just going to fall into a place like in a domino effect afterwards.
It could happen. It could happen almost overnight. The whole bankster economy. I mean, these banksters, they moved the crop over to Mexico. They moved it over to Canada. I mean, you can grow hemp in Canada. We got Hemp USA up on my site, and he gets all of his hemp from Canada. I don't know what hoops he's got to go through, but at least that's a thinking man would have to say, why isn't it Why can't we grow hemp here? Why can't the farmers grow hemp here? Let's see, the hemp renews and restores the soil. The hemp reaches deep enough to pull out the fulvic acid out of the ground that we have to go to get it. We got to go back to prehistoric plants or hemp. And if you follow all the information on hemp as a food, Jack Hara used to tell me that hemp could save the world. He said if you had one thing, you could take one thing, you were being sent to a deserted island, and you could take one thing with you. What would it be? What would it be? And the answer is a hemp seed, a marijuana seed. If you take that, from that you can grow your food, your clothing, your everything. Structures, everything. And he was right. He was right. Jack always said hemp could save the world, and I swear that it could.
Yeah, it's a modern miracle, for sure. Of our time, I think it's a pivotal thing, for sure.
Now, what about how are your books selling? And I want to talk. Well, let's go back to the Bible a little bit. You mentioned soma. What is the word soma? Where does that come from? Is that biblical too?
Not a biblical. This isn't a biblical term. This is going back to the Bennett religion, which the Hindu religion in India originates with. But the Hindu religion, actually, or the Vedic religion, actually came to India via people from the Russian steppes who spread the use of cannabis and the term cannabis itself throughout the ancient world. And soma was a beverage of these people, a sacred beverage that was prepared from a sacred plant of the same name, and inspired their religious texts. And there's been much debate about what the identity of this plant, soma, was. Popularly, due to the work of the mycologist R. Gordon Wasson, it's thought to be the Amanita muscarium mushroom. But in my book, Cannabis and the Soma Solution, I point out the number of flaws in R. Gordon Wasson's reasoning in coming to this conclusion, and then also more recent archaeological discoveries related to the Soma cult. And I show that it was a preparation of cannabis, much like the Hindu beverage bhang, which is still drunk today in India in celebrations such as the Holi Festival or the Kumbh Mela and Shivaratri and other holy days in India, as it has been for thousands of years. So it's a sacred beverage that inspired the Indian Vedas and the Hindu religion through that, and then also it was used in Persia as Hayoma, and inspired the Zoroastrian religion and was used by their founders for religious ecstasy.
The Vedas in India, they go back a long ways, and they talk about advanced civilizations, they talk about spacecraft, they talk about a lot of things, and this is one of the sources of it. Now I've had Christian identity. I just did a book on Christian identity with a pastor, and he's a nice enough guy, but he didn't want to couldn't have anything to do with me because I was supporting marijuana, using marijuana. I said, what part of Plant of Renown, what part of the Bible don't you understand? I mean, they're telling us that this is.
Yeah. Well, there's like references in the book of Revelation to sorcery. And these come from Greek term pharmakia, which our modern term pharmacy also comes from. And they make reference to the magical use of plants. And some Christian evangelicals believe that this is a reference to so-called drug culture and the use of marijuana. And they see all use of these substances as some sort of like sorcery or witchcraft, and therefore get against it.
Truly advanced science would appear to be witchcraft to anybody, wouldn't it?
Yeah, for sure. You know what I mean? It's like something you don't understand, really. It becomes witchcraft for a lot of people in different times. And, it's a pretty crazy association, It's like, you can't have it both ways. Either you guys give me all the plants, or they're all witch plants, you know what I mean? It's almost like some people want to put the power of creation into the devil and say the devil created marijuana, but that's not really backed up by any sort of biblical passages.
No, and I'm not sure the. Yeah, I think the devil just sort of represents our ill will towards our fellow man.
Oh, I'd agree with that 100% for sure.
Now, what can we do about it? Now, I wrote a book about it, and I'm going back over that book, and I'm in the process of rewriting. I wrote it about 40 years ago, from the inside of a jailhouse. So my descriptions of the prison scenes in that book are excellent. And you know, I've been out for 40 years, and got harassed a lot through various agencies. You know, when the FBI is kind enough to list you in their guide to right-wing extremists with your, you know, name and phone number and all that, it's interesting what you get. But they're trying to demonize. Now, I was there when Normal started, when Keith Stroop put Normal together. We did that at the McAlpin Hotel. I know a lot of people in the paraphernalia industry because I was in that for a long time. And are things, you know, again, the medical marijuana, it seems to be getting better, but it feels like we're just due for a revolution that would just sweep the world, because even in Spain now, there's a village in Spain, and I've got that linked right under our show here. There's a village in Spain that is growing marijuana for the money now. If all of the farms and not corporate farms, not talking about Archer Daniels, Midland, Monsanto type farms, I'm talking about the small family farms, if they were allowed to grow hemp and marijuana, wouldn't that turn our economy around? And yeah, if we could empty our prisons, if we had to release everybody that's being held in a prison for a victimless crime, they didn't rob nobody, didn't steal nothing, if they were cut loose today, wouldn't that be a good thing? Wouldn't we? It cost us $50,000 if you arrest somebody because he's smoking a joint or snorting a line or got a little bit of cocaine in his pocket there. If you put them in, it costs you as a taxpayer $50,000 in America a year to feed and clothe and house these people because they did what?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. You know, vote for Ron Paul if you're in the U.S. and hopefully he gets the Republican ticket, although it's not looking that great. Yeah, well, it would be a massive. That's what I mean. It would be a paradigm shift to change that, you know. And it's unbelievable that people like President Barack Obama try to laugh the question off when it's the number one question asked by people when he's on the internet. And, you know, asking out to the public to ask questions, you know what I mean? That's the number one question. And he just kind of laughs it off like it's some sort of joke. Oh, those stoned internet people, you know? It's like, unbelievable. Unbelievable. There's no real logical answer for it. It never has been like the cry for legalization has never been so loud and had so many, you know, well-known people and even some politicians behind it. You know, we had Richard Branson in the White House there last week asking Obama for a split. You know?
Who was that? Who was that?
Richard Branson. He's the billionaire activist there, the guy who travels around in a hot air balloon. And does
oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, he was a guest at the White House, and when he was there, he asked Obama for a split. It's been in a lot of the news this last week, you know, and he's been pushing for legalization. He's also going up here in Canada trying to talk to the Canadian government about their insane Bill C-10, which I was talking about earlier, which, you know, massively increases cannabis claims.
The Pat Robertson has come out for the legalization of marijuana now.
Yeah, well, it's great. Good on Pat, you know, and I imagine he's been taking a lot of heat for that from other Christians and commentators and all that type of stuff. Good on Pat to be able to see through all that prejudice and recognize this injustice for what it is. Even though he's, you know, not a proponent of marijuana, he probably never smoked any, and probably doesn't really understand the issue fully. But good on him for recognizing just how unjust the situation is.
Well, I've almost decided. I've just did an article, and that's probably up on my website somewhere. That I almost feel like I took a wrong direction. I mean, when I walked out of prison with this novel, and I didn't go to right to work on it. I went something. I did something else. I did something else. I did something else. I started something else, and I carried it around for 40 years before I got it typed up and put into the computer where I could take a look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was way ahead of my time. I think that I wrote it before I met Jack Hare. I met it before I did the research, and now I'm looking forward to releasing it because I think it really does. I point out if we restore the family farm, we cut down on people start eating the right food, and if you're growing hemp, marijuana in a garden, and you rotate the crop, all of the food that you eat is going to be better for you.
Yeah.
It does that. I mean, that's what. And in Canada, there's a gentleman there that he has a website called Phoenix Tears, and he was curing his neighbors of cancer using hash oil.
Yeah, Rick Simpson. Yeah.
Rick Simpson. Yes, sir.
He's in Europe now. He's had to leave Canada. Isn't able to come back to his home country because of an arrest warrant for healing people with marijuana.
That's right. The
a reefer refugee, in a sense, and yeah, it's tragic.
Where do we go from here? Now, one of the things that I've talked about the whole New World Order thing is that their strategy is to divide and conquer. You know, they want to try to demonize me for being a patriot, for starting a militia. They want to demonize me for supporting cannabis and all that. That's their style. That's what they do. You know, you're looking for communists. You're trying to find communists. Well, you're a McCarthyite. Oh, that's McCarthyism. You know. And they're trying to do that to Americans right now. They're trying to demonize the Tea Parties. They're trying to demonize the Occupy movements. They're trying to demonize the veterans, and they're trying to make all Americans and Canadians. If we have a North American Union here, don't we have the same problems in Canada and in America?
Yeah, well, the two countries are definitely working more in conjunction against the populations than they ever have before. Yeah, I don't know what to say to that. It's just the reality of the situation that we're dealing with. You know, it seems to be a major dividing issue between our side and their side. It seems to be Canada's right in the middle. You know.
All right, let me do this here.